Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu slams military plans for daily tactical pauses to let aid into Gaza. More than 4,000 people marched through Brussels in protest against right-wing ideology and racism. England get their European Championship campaign off to a strong start with a 1-0 victory over Serbia. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has criticized plans announced by the military to implement daily tactical pauses to facilitate deliveries of aid into Gaza. The army said the pauses, designed to allow trucks to reach the Kerem Shalom crossing, would take place every day until further notice. But one Israeli official said that Netanyahu had made it clear to his military secretary that the pauses were unacceptable to him. This dispute is the latest in a string of clashes between members of Netanyahu's coalition and the military over how the war is conducted. It comes a week after centrist former General Benny Gantz quit the government, saying Netanyahu had no effective strategy in Gaza. Netanyahu is also facing criticism from regular Israelis. They accuse his government of not doing enough to secure the release of the hostages being held by Hamas in Gaza. They've held weekly protests in Tel Aviv demanding Netanyahu call fresh elections and step down. Meanwhile, at least 9 people, including 5 children, were killed in an Israeli airstrike on the Burej camp in central Gaza on Sunday. That airstrike came as Muslims started marking the major Eid al-Adha holiday. The Israeli military operation in Gaza has so far killed over 37,000 Palestinians. But the Hamas-controlled health ministry doesn't differentiate between civilians and combatants in its count. The Houthi rebels say they've targeted 2 civilian vessels and a US Navy destroyer in waters off Yemen. The destroyer and a crude oil tanker were hit with missiles in the Red Sea, while a second tanker was targeted with drones in the Arabian Sea. The Houthis started targeting shipping in November in solidarity with Palestine, but the strikes often hit ships unrelated to the war. The attacks have halved traffic in a maritime corridor crucial for cargo between Asia, Europe and the Middle East.
A success without fear of being refuted. In the G7 final press conference, Meloni's words left no room for interpretation. She's an exception among other G7 leaders, being the only one to have come out stronger from the EU vote, with a few countries facing national elections soon. The war in Ukraine was high on the agenda. The $50 billion deal to help the country through profits on frozen Russian assets was one of the summit's main achievements, something that wasn't taken for granted, according to Meloni.
Intendiamo continuare a sostenere l'Ucraina e abbiamo anzi scelto di rafforzare il nostro impegno e le diverse linee di azione con un approccio che continua a essere a 360 gradi per aiutare la nazione aggredita a guardare al futuro.
On the weaker side, the G7 has been accused of double standards for offering strengthened support to Ukraine compared to the leader's softer stance on the war in Gaza. One of the most talked about topics at the summit was the absence of the word abortion from the final declaration. Many suspected these had created tensions between Italy and France. Meloni dismissed the issue, saying that it was done to avoid the document being too repetitive.
Quando una cosa si ripete, si richiamano i documenti precedenti. Credo sinceramente che la polemica sia stata costruita in maniera totalmente artefatta e infatti è una polemica che non è esistita nel vertice.
Managing to have the Pope among the summit's guest leaders, a first for a pontiff, is widely recognized as a boost to Meloni's standing. The inclusion of countries from the global south to make the summit more inclusive was also one of Meloni's main goals. But in the long term, it is yet to be seen what concrete results it will bring. Giorgio Orlandi for Euronews in Bari.
More than 4,500 people have marched through Brussels in protest against right-wing ideology. Organised by the Anti-Fascist Coordination of Belgium, the march brought together around 20 social movements and organisations. It's the second major march in the Belgian capital denouncing the far right since the EU elections on June the 9th, which saw right and far right parties winning big.
Cette marche est importante aujourd'hui pour montrer un message d'espoir face au message de désespoir que l'extrême droite veut nous porter. Elle est importante pour montrer qu'on est solidaire avec tout le monde, peu importe leur nationalité, peu importe ce qu'ils gagnent, peu importe ce qu'ils font. On est solidaire et on veut une société qui ne nous divise pas, une société qui n'exclut pas, une société qui n'est pas raciste, qui n'est pas sexiste.
Arguably the most dramatic win for the right was in France. Marine Le Pen's national rally took first place in the polls with more than 31% of the vote, prompting President Emmanuel Macron to dissolve the National Assembly and call snap elections. There were also victories for right-leaning and populist parties in Italy, Austria, Hungary and Bulgaria.
Le retour aux urnes du
Demonstrators in Brussels were keen to show that the rise of the far right wasn't inevitable and that it was important to confront it by building social and democratic alternatives.
German police have shot and wounded a man allegedly threatening them with an axe and a firebomb in the northern city of Hamburg. Officers opened fire on the man after he refused to put down the axe, hitting him in the leg. The incident took place in the St. Pauli area of the city, where thousands of fans were gathering ahead of a Euros 2024 group stage match between Poland and the Netherlands. German authorities have put officers on high alert during the tournament, but police in Hamburg say the attack was not related to the Euros.
Ja, wir gehen davon aus, dass das hier ein solitärer Fall ist, also abgekoppelt vom Fußball. Es hat offensichtlich auch keinen Fußballbezug, sondern hier haben wir es eben mit einem Einzeltäter zu tun. Und insofern sehe ich jetzt überhaupt keine Gefährdungslage oder keine Auswirkungen auf das Spiel.
Police also shot to death an Afghan man on Friday who fatally attacked a compatriot and later wounded 3 people in Vollmerstedt, a small town near Berlin.
The negotiations to decide who will lead the European Union for the next 5 years officially kicked off on Monday. The 3 big posts to fill are the European Commission President, the European Council President, and the High Representative for Foreign Policy. But the heads of state and government will have to respect a series of geographical, gender, and party requirements. The clear favorite for the European Commission President is the current holder, Germany's Ursula von der Leyen. However, the Italian Mario Draghi, now almost ruled out, or even the current Prime Minister of Greece, Kyriakos Mitsotakis, have both been mentioned before as favorites. The EPP's victory in the European elections and the stability of von der Leyen's time in office work in her favor.
The European Council will be quite motivated in getting, the institutional turnover, let's say, get this finalized quite quickly, because, we live in very turbulent times, very turbulent geopolitical times. We're facing potentially another presidency of Trump. So I think leaders are really, very keen on having a new commission with a new agenda installed as quick as possible.
For the Council President, the field is more open, although everything points to it going to be a social democrat. The most likely candidates are Portugal's former Prime Minister Antonio Costa, now that his judicial problems seem to have been cleared up, and Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen. For the post of High Representative, the field is even wider, although in principle it should go to a liberal. On the table are Estonia's Prime Minister Kaja Kallas, Poland's Foreign Minister Radoslav Sikorski, and Belgium's acting Prime Minister Alexander De Croo. Although for now it seems that the favorite is Kallas, despite her hardline stand on Russia.
There are so many balances that they have to take into account that I think this fact is outweighed by the fact that she's female, that she's from a Baltic state, and that she, checks lots of the other boxes.
The final picture could be exactly this one or a completely different one. 5 years ago, the negotiation took 3 nights. This time, it could go much faster.
England have got their European Championship campaign off to a strong start with a 1-0 finish against Serbia. Jude Bellingham scored England's only goal in the 13th minute. Harry Kane very nearly extended the lead in the second half when Serbia's goalkeeper pushed his far post header onto the underside of the bar. Kane set a record for his country by making his 23rd appearance at a major tournament. And England manager Gareth Southgate was full of praise for his on-pitch performance.
I thought he did an excellent job in the second half when we were struggling to keep hold of it, and his technical ability to hold the ball for us in a few of those moments was really helpful. So, you know, look, this team is still coming together. Everybody's expecting us to waltz through. There's a lot of hard work ahead.
But the build-up to the game had been overshadowed by concerns about violence between rival supporters. And some of those fears were realised when police had to rush in to separate brawling fans in Gelsenkirchen earlier in the day. Water misting systems have been installed near Saudi Arabia's Mount Arafat to relieve pilgrims from the searing heat which has coincided with this year's Hajj pilgrimage. The National Centre for Meteorology says the temperature on Saturday was 47 degrees Celsius. Saudi authorities expect the number of pilgrims this year to exceed 2 million, approaching pre-pandemic levels. Every Muslim must perform Hajj at least once in their life if they're physically and financially able to do so.